Something has shifted in the balance of global power, and Washington does not want you to notice it. When an American president boards a plane to meet a rival, the world assumes America is setting the terms. America is choosing the moment. America is arriving with the leverage. That assumption is wrong. What is about to happen on May 14th is something far more uncomfortable, far more consequential, and almost entirely absent from every mainstream analysis of this summit. Donald Trump needs this meeting more than Xi Jinping does. Not slightly more, not marginally more, fundamentally, urgently, undeniably more. And today, we are going to prove it. Not with opinions, not with speculation, but by placing both hands on the table, Trump's and Xi's, and counting exactly what each man is holding when he walks into that room in Beijing. My name is Dr. Adrian Cole. This is Empire Signal. Stay with me. Let us start with Trump's hand, because the picture of American leverage, when examined honestly, is considerably thinner than what the cameras are showing you. Trump arrives in Beijing carrying 3 urgent needs. Not wants, not preferences, needs. The first is the Strait of Hormuz. Since February 28th, the day the U.S.-Israel war on Iran began, the world's most critical energy waterway has been effectively closed. 20% of global oil supply, gone, stranded, 2,000 ships sitting on either side of a narrow corridor that America's own military operations helped destabilize. Think about what that number actually means. 2,000 ships, carrying everything from crude oil to grain to manufactured goods, sitting idle, their crews waiting, their cargo delayed, their owners watching insurance costs explode and delivery windows collapse. Trump launched Project Freedom, a bold naval escort initiative to force commercial ships through the strait. The kind of decisive, muscular move his political brand is built on. The kind of announcement that generates headlines and projects strength. But here is what Project Freedom did not solve. Shipping companies looked at the initiative and hesitated. Insurance companies had already pulled coverage from vessels attempting the passage. Iranian missiles are real. Iranian targeting is accurate. And no commercial operator on the planet wants their tanker to become the next headline when a projectile finds its mark. So the ships remain stranded. The strait remains closed. Oil prices keep climbing, and the global economy keeps absorbing the cost of a waterway that the most powerful military in human history cannot fully reopen on its own. Trump needs that waterway open. His economy needs it. His allies need it. The global markets that American credibility depends on need it. And the fastest path to opening it runs directly through Beijing. Not through American military power, not through sanctions, not through diplomatic pressure applied to Tehran directly, but through the one relationship that gives China genuine influence over Iranian decision-making, the economic lifeline that Beijing has been providing to Tehran for years. That is the first need, and it is enormous. The second urgent need is the Iran war itself. America did not plan for a prolonged conflict. The original calculation, a targeted, decisive operation with a clean exit and a clear outcome, has collided with the reality of a determined adversary that has been preparing for exactly this scenario for decades. Iran has absorbed devastating strikes on its own infrastructure, military installations destroyed, economic facilities damaged, Revolutionary Guard assets degraded. The punishment has been severe and real, and Iran is still fighting, still firing missiles, still deploying drones across the region, still holding the strait, still demonstrating to every watching government on the planet that a regional power, even one under maximum American military and economic pressure, can impose costs on the global system that reach into every economy, every fuel station, every household budget on the planet. The war is expensive. It is politically complicated. It is generating pressure from allies who are absorbing Iranian strikes on their own territory. And it is showing no clear path to the kind of resolution that Trump can stand in front of a camera and declare as a definitive American victory. China has influence over Iran that America does not have and cannot buy. Economic influence, the deep, structural influence that comes from being Tehran's most important trading partner across years of sanctions, isolation, and pressure. The kind of influence that creates genuine leverage over Iranian decision-making, not through threats or ultimatums, but through the simple, unavoidable reality that Iran's economic survival has depended on the relationship continuing. Trump needs Beijing to use that leverage, to signal to Tehran that de-escalation serves Chinese interests, to help create the conditions for an end to a war that is draining American resources, dividing American strategic attention, and generating the kind of sustained political pressure that makes every other priority harder to address. That is the second need, and it is just as enormous as the first. The third need is the most visible, and in some ways, the most revealing about Trump's position going into this meeting. Trump needs a win, a headline, a number, a deal he can hold up and say, "This is what American leadership delivers." A trade framework with specific commitments, something concrete enough to announce at a press conference, clear enough to explain in a tweet, significant enough for the coverage to carry as a genuine triumph. Because Trump's political brand is built on visible victories, on deals that can be pointed to, on moments where strength is demonstrated, results are delivered, and the case for American leadership is made tangible rather than theoretical. Three urgent needs. Three things that only Beijing, or Beijing's active cooperation, can help provide. The strait, the war, the win. Now let us look at Xi's hand. Xi Jinping walks into this summit holding something that money cannot buy and military force cannot create. Time. He is not facing an election. He is not managing a 24-hour news cycle that demands constant victories to maintain political viability. He is not answering to an impatient public, asking why oil prices are still elevated and why the conflict has no clear end in sight. Xi operates on a timescale that Washington's political system is structurally, fundamentally incapable of matching. He can wait. He can let urgency accumulate on the American side of the table, while his own side remains composed, patient, and entirely unhurried. In any negotiation, the side that can afford to walk away has the advantage, always, without exception. The side that cannot walk away pays more, always. Trump cannot walk away from Beijing empty-handed. The costs of failure, to his presidency, to the global economy, to America's relationships with allies already under stress from the war, are simply too high. A failed summit is not a neutral outcome, it is an active setback. Xi can walk away, not happily, not without real costs of his own, but he can absorb the failure of this summit in ways that Trump cannot afford to absorb. That asymmetry, that difference in who needs a deal more, is the fundamental fact that shapes everything else about this negotiation. And beyond time, Xi holds something even more concrete. He holds the key to the Strait of Hormuz. Not through military power. China will not fire a single shot in this conflict, but through the economic relationship with Iran that keeps Tehran viable, that keeps the IRGC funded, that keeps the operational capacity for missile strikes intact, that keeps the strait under pressure. A phone call from Xi to Tehran, a quiet signal that China's continued economic support has conditions attached, that Iranian behavior in the strait is straining those conditions, that Beijing's patience is not unlimited. That phone call would be worth more to Trump's presidency than almost any trade deal negotiated over 2 days in Beijing. And Xi has not made it. Not yet. Because why would any skilled negotiator spend their most valuable chip before the negotiation even begins? This is the core asymmetry that defines this summit. Trump needs something Xi controls. Xi wants things Trump controls. But Trump's needs are urgent, visible, and politically time-sensitive. Xi's wants are strategic, patient, measured in years rather than news cycles. Urgency always pays more than patience at the negotiating table. This is not opinion. This is the documented pattern of every major international negotiation in modern history. Now let us talk about what this asymmetry produces in practice. When a leader walks into a negotiation more desperate than his counterpart, concessions happen, not announced ones, the quiet ones, buried in diplomatic language, existing as subtle shifts in position that only reveal their full significance months or years later. On trade, a deal that looks significant in the headline, but contains flexibility mechanisms that allow Beijing to under-deliver without formal consequences. On technology, a quiet easing of restrictions on Chinese firms, not a formal reversal, a regulatory priority shift. The 1,000 small bureaucratic decisions that collectively reshape policy without ever making the front page. And then there is Taiwan. Taiwan is always present in a US-China negotiation. Always. Even when it is not on the official agenda. It exists as the permanent backdrop, the unspoken context that both sides feel constantly throughout every conversation. Xi will push on Taiwan, not with a dramatic ultimatum, with the kind of careful, patient pressure that Chinese diplomacy has perfected over decades, probing the language of joint statements, requesting private assurances on arms sales, suggesting working groups that give Beijing ongoing influence over how Taiwan is framed. And Trump, focused on his Hormuz solution, his trade headline, his summit success, may give ground in ways he does not fully recognize in the moment. Taiwan does not feel urgent to Trump the way the Strait feels urgent, the way the war feels urgent. To Xi, Taiwan is the most important issue on the table, has been since he took power, will be long after this summit is forgotten. That difference in priority, in what each man considers urgent versus important, is precisely where the most consequential concessions in international diplomacy tend to occur. Now let us go one level deeper, because there is a dimension almost no Western analysis is addressing. Xi Jinping is not an unconstrained autocrat operating in a vacuum. The Chinese Communist Party has its own internal logic, its own powerful institutions, its own factions that must be navigated. Xi has made enormous promises: the China Dream, reunification with Taiwan, economic prosperity, the restoration of Chinese greatness. These promises create accountability, not to voters, but to the internal logic of a system that evaluates its leaders on whether they deliver. If Xi walks out of Beijing having secured meaningful economic relief, that is a concrete deliverable. It demonstrates that his patient approach to managing the American relationship produces results. If Xi secures even a subtle shift in American positioning on Taiwan, quietly, carefully, deniably, that strengthens his standing within the system. Xi needs this summit to succeed, not with the same urgency as Trump, but the need is real, and that mutual need is what creates the space for a deal. The question has never been whether a deal happens. The question is what each side actually gets, and what each side quietly gives up to get it. Deals made under asymmetric pressure favor the less desperate party, not dramatically, but in the margins, in the fine print, in the working arrangements that never make the official readout. And those margins, over time, have a way of becoming the actual shape of the relationship. Watch the summit. Watch the language. Watch what American officials say about Taiwan in the weeks that follow. Watch China's behavior toward Iran in the months after the meeting, because if the Strait of Hormuz begins to ease, you will know something was traded in that room worth more than any announced trade deal. What makes this summit historically unusual is how visible the asymmetry has become. The closed strait, the stranded ships, the elevated oil prices felt by every American consumer, the war with no clean exit, the publicly stated need for Chinese cooperation on Iran. The leverage gap is not hidden in intelligence briefings. It is playing out in public, every single day. And Xi knows this. Every government watching this summit knows this. Every ally and adversary calculating their position in the emerging global order knows this. May 14th is not just a bilateral meeting between two leaders. It is a signal to the entire world about the current state of American power, about whether urgency can be managed without concession, about whether the most powerful nation in history can navigate a moment of genuine vulnerability without giving ground on the things that matter most. Trump needs Beijing more than Beijing needs Trump. Remember that sentence when you watch the handshake. My name is Dr. Adrian Cole. This is Empire Signal. The next signal drops in 48 hours. Stay with us.